Okay, this video might be a little bit longer than they traditionally are, but there are no exercises for you to do after this video. I'm going to do a walkthrough here of how to use the database system that we're using for this class, which is called phpMyAdmin. Okay, there are two instances of it that you're going to have to use. So we're going to look at the phpMyAdmin system that is built into XAMPP. And then we're going to, but when you upload your files, you're going to have to create, when you've created those databases in your local phpMyAdmin on XAMPP, you're going to have to export and import those databases into CSUNIX so that your assignments work when you host them. So creating a database has a few gotchas, but it's not that tricky. So we're going to do a walkthrough of creating a database and a single table within that database. Then along the way, I'm going to show you how phpMyAdmin works and everything, give you a tour. And then we're going to walk through the process of exporting that database and then importing it into CSUNIX. So essentially uploading your database so that when you create an assignment and upload it, it will still be able to work. Okay, so the database basically, for all intents and purposes, the database that you're using has to live on the same server as the one you're accessing. So when you're using XAMPP, the database has to be local on your machine, and when you're using CSUNIX, it has to be on the CSUNIX machine. So if you take a look at the module guide, we're looking at section 2 now, and you can see it's written kind of like a tutorial. So you could just try following this tutorial. There is a separate document, so this is document 1. Document 1B, which you'll find in the modules, is some extra notes that I added to help students specifically with our situation. So we'll take a look at these notes as we need to, along with the module 2 guide. And what I'm going to do is there are exercises in the module 2 exercises. There are exercises for part 2. We're just going to, rather than have you do them on your own, we're just going to walk through these exercises together. And by the end of that, I'm hoping you will have created your first database table and you'll have it uploaded to CSUNIX. Okay, so let's take a look at, excuse me, let's take a look at phpMyAdmin for the first time. But before we do that, actually, I just want to say what it is. phpMyAdmin is it's a database management system that manages an SQL database. So phpMyAdmin, admin means that it's an administration tool that you log into that lets you configure your databases. The my part is from MySQL. So phpMyAdmin was designed specifically to work with an instance of the MySQL database. And the PHP part is because the whole tool is actually written in PHP, which is kind of cool. So so what that means is there's nothing you can do through this tool that you couldn't also do through your own PHP program. And that'll be the final lesson this week, as I'll begin to show you how to do that. Okay, so in order to get this going, we're going to start on XAMPP. So I'm going to run XAMPP here, and you guys should probably just be prepared to follow along with me here. So pause the video when you need to catch up, rewind when you need to, and so on. I'm going to start the server. My server right now is on port 80. Check your port to see what it is, but mine starts okay on port 80. We went through this in a live class a while back. You may need to change that port, so just keep that in mind when you're looking at the URLs that I type. For this, we're also going to have to start the database system. So I'm going to start that. I think I might have misspoken earlier. I think I might have said that PHP is a database management system. Just in case I did, that's not true. MySQL is the database management system. phpMyAdmin is the tool to manipulate that database, the MySQL databases. So there's SQL, which is the language. There's MySQL, which is the database tool, and there is phpMyAdmin, which is the tool that we use to interact with the database. So hopefully this will work. Hopefully this will start up okay. For most students, MySQL starts okay. The only time it doesn't start is usually when there is another instance of SQL running. And this might happen if you're in the database course and they have you running a different type of SQL database. It might conflict, so you might have to shut that down in order to start up MySQL. Okay, so we'll deal with that in the live class if that becomes a thing. But hopefully it started for you okay. If it didn't, check to see if you've got other instances of SQL running and shut those down, and then restart MySQL. Okay, so that's all good. I'm going to put that away. Now that I have it running, I should be able to visit it. So I'm going to type localhost. I don't have to put the port number, but it is on, mine is on port 80, but you would put your port number there. And then it's phpMyAdmin all lowercase. And the way XAMPP is configured, we don't have to log in. When we do this on CSUNIX, we'll have to log in, but there's no password for it, so it's open just because it's a local tool for developers to use. So this is what phpMyAdmin looks like. There's a bunch of tabs up here that you can click on, and what you're looking at over here, this is a list of databases that are already in the system. These, just leave them, don't touch them, just leave them the way that they are. They may contain important information for XAMPP to work. What we're going to do is create a new database. Now, because this is XAMPP on your local machine, you can create as many databases as you want, but on CSUNIX, the way that it's set up, you will only have one database, and that database will be named after your student ID. So it's named after your login ID. Same thing for me. When I log in, I don't log in with my student ID on CSUNIX. I log in with my last name, Scott, but my database is called Scott, is also named after my account ID. So what I would suggest you guys do is immediately create a new database. So I click the new button here and just give it a name. I'm going to type Scott, but you should put your full student ID starting with all the zeros there and create that database. Okay, that'll make things easier if you always just are working with tables within that one database. It'll make it easier when you go to upload because you won't have to change anything. Well, it will limit the amount of stuff you have to change. All the defaults, just leave them the way they are. Everything's fine. And create. And now I have a database. So, and you notice it's selected. So when I select these things, I can see the various databases and I see the list of tables in those databases. When I go on my new Scott database that I created, I don't have any tables. So the next thing to do is to create our first table. So let's go just take a quick look at the exercises. So we've already done this. We've created the new database. Now we're going to create a table, and the idea is this table is going to be for storing student information for this course. So these are the fields or columns that we want in the table. So there are 7 numeric grades. There's a start date, a completion date, a student reflection, which is paragraphs, and it says to make sure that the table has an auto-incrementing primary key. So if you remember in the last lesson, when I inserted things, I didn't have to specify the primary key. In this case, we can probably make the primary key the student ID. That's probably what we'll do. That makes the most sense because student IDs are meant to be unique. All of these unique keys, we have a bunch of unique keys that identify us. Any bank number, credit card number, student ID, employee ID, social insurance number that you might have. Each one of those things is a primary key. You can think of it as a primary key for a database table somewhere. It's unique to you. So we'll use student ID as the primary key. And then there's some rules down here about numeric grades having a default of 0, start date defaults to this year's fall term start date, etc. And student reflection and completion date can be null. So we'll go through all of that stuff. How many columns do we need? 1, 2, 3, plus 7 columns for grades. That's 10, 11, 12, 13. So we need 13 columns in this database. So let's go in this table, I should say. And we need to give it a name. You can call your name whatever you want. I'm just going to call it students. And I'm going to say it needs 13 columns. Go. So what that's going to do is take us to a very user-unfriendly form with a whole bunch of fields in it. Now, this can get confusing because each of these rows is to configure a column in the database. So let's take a look at what the column names are again. First name, let's start with the first 3. First name, last name, student ID. I'm actually going to put student ID first because that's going to be our primary key, and I like having student ID as the first column. This is the type that we have to specify. These are most of the types that we're going to use. You might occasionally need to use float or double, but we're going to use int for this. It's an integer. We can ignore all of this stuff, all of this extra stuff, defaults. Some of these fields we'll look at in a moment, but I'm just going to click AI. AI stands for auto increment. Click that, and it automatically, when I did that, it automatically set the index, which is the same as the key, to primary. So that should create our primary key field, student ID. Okay, I'm going to suggest that you guys always use single word identifiers here. You can put spaces in your column names, but it could cause you problems later. So just stick to one word. So we need first name. Now this is going to be text. There's two ways to do text in SQL. One is to use varchar, and the other is to use text. Varchar is a slightly more efficient way of storing things where you give a maximum length to the string. So it's for things like user IDs and names and stuff like that, and URLs and email addresses. Text is much longer. For much longer bits of information. You can see it has a maximum length of, says there, 65,000 characters, so 65 kilobytes. So if you're storing blog postings, essays, long pieces of text, you use text, but if it's short, you use varchar. So I'm going to enter varchar, and I need a length, so I'm going to say that their name can be 40 characters long. You can choose whatever you want for that. That's all we need to do there for now. Then last name is going to be varchar. I'll also say length 40. That might not be long enough. You might think 80 maybe, just to be on the safe side. And then, yeah, I think that was it for the first three columns. So first name, last name, varchar 80. Let's take a look at the rules here. I think the next question you want to ask is, do I want the user to always specify these fields, or can I allow a default value or a null value for these fields? And I think we need a first name and a last name for students. Although, I mean, that's contentious. I know some students here at Mohawk, I think, don't only have one name, or it might be difficult for them to fit into first name and last name. First name and last name, I do recognize that that's kind of a Western, North American, Western European concept. So some people coming here from other cultures have to twist their names to fit that. So you know what? Feel free to change that if you want in your table to be some other system of first name and last name, other than first name and last name. Okay, then we want numeric grades, and it says make sure the numeric grades have a default of 0. So there are 7 grades. There are 5 assignments, a midterm, and a final exam. So I'm just going to call these A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. I'm going to make them integers. You could make an argument for float, but I don't normally give out. Well, do I? Actually, I do. So maybe we should change that to double. Double, 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 and double. And this is supposed to have a default value. So what you do is you go over to this default column here, and you say as defined 0, like that. As defined 0, as defined 0, as defined 0, as defined 0, like that. And then we have a midterm. I usually give out integer midterm marks, so I'll say that it's and final. I'll say that it's an integer, and this needs to be as defined 0 as well. Okay, so those are my 7 columns of grades for the course. Let's go back over here. Numeric grades have a default of 0. Then we have, the next thing is start date and completion date. And start date is supposed to have a default value as well for this term's start date. And student reflection and completion date can be null. So we have 3 more columns to do: start date, completion date, and student reflection. So start, completion, and reflection. Call them that. Student reflection is something that the student writes. So it could be long, so we're going to make this type text. And it says it can be null. So we're going to have to scroll up to the top here. This is our null thing, our null checkbox. If we check this off, it allows that column to be not specified, and it gets the special value of null. Completion is a date, and it can be null. And the start is also a date, but it can have a value. Here's where I'm going to have to remember the format off the top of my head. The start date value. So the start date for this term was, I believe, September the 9th, the Wednesday. So I think that's going to be, I could be wrong about this, 2020 dash month 09 dash 09. Oh, that's convenient that the month and the day are the same. I think that's correct. Let me just see. Did I write anything about it in the module here? Nope, didn't write anything about it here. Oh, here we are. Date. As an example, but it's not showing what it's going to be. So I'm walking through, in this example here, I'm walking through creating a new table, making a primary key, using default and null values, etc., etc. If I get this wrong, I can always update it later. I'm pretty sure that's the format, though. Okay, before I hit save, so when we're done, we hit save. Before I hit save, I'm going to deliberately make a mistake. So I'm going to remove the length from this varchar. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I want to do it to show you what happens when you make a mistake. So I'm going to hit save. It says, please enter a valid length, and that's all it says. So if you don't, I know what mistake I made. I deliberately made a mistake. If you don't know, that can be really confusing. But what it's done is quietly, without calling your attention to it, it put the cursor into the field that had the error in it. So if I had the cursor down here in the A1 field and hit save, after I click OK on the error, I have to go searching through here to find the column, find where it's put the cursor. Now I can change that to 80, and then we'll hit save and hope that everything else is okay. Okay. So what's happened here? I've created a new table with the name that I gave it, students, and it's taken me to the structure tab. So I'm looking at the structure of my table here, and you can see most of the information that I put here. Midterms and finals are integers. Int 11, I think, means the number of digits of integer that it allows. A1 through A5 are doubles. First name and last name are varchars. You can see here that this student ID is the primary key, and that it's auto-incrementing, meaning you don't have to specify it. So because of all these default values and ability to make things null, you can actually create a student with just their first name and their last name. You can insert just using those, and all the various defaults will get filled in for the rest of it. Okay, so I think that's what we're going to try next, but let me just check the exercises. Yeah, let me show you though, if we had made a mistake, say on the start date here, we can hit change on the column like that, and it gives us just a single row like that. We could change this to September, maybe it was the 8th. I'll just change it to the 8th for the heck of it. We can change everything about the column here, and then hit save, and now it's changed to September 8th. Doesn't really matter whether it's correct or not. If I want to get rid of a column, I can hit the drop button here. And if I want to add more columns, so if you want, another way to do this is to start with a few columns and then start adding columns. I can add a column like this, add one column. Let's add two columns, go. We'll call this trash 1 and trash 2. I can configure them any way I want. I'll just leave the defaults. I hit save. And if I go back to structure, by the way, what it's telling me here is it's showing me the SQL command that it created to do the thing that I asked it to do. So this is the actual SQL command that it used, which is kind of cool. You can edit it and hit go to execute it again if you want. But I'm just going to go back to the structure, and we'll see my two new columns there. But I don't really want them there, so I'm going to drop them. See, it's going to execute this command, which alters the table by dropping that column. I'm going to drop this one. Okay, so you can always change the structure of the table here. If I go over to browse, it's going to show me, it's trying to show me what's in the table, but there's nothing in there yet. So it's just showing me the header rows and then nothing in there. And this is what it did. It did select star from students. and it returned an empty result, 0 rows. Okay, I think what we're going to do now is add some students. So insert records for 5 different students using the Insert tab on phpMyAdmin. So look at these various tabs up here. We can insert this way. Okay, now this is again not a super nice form, but you'll notice it's filled in default values and null values for some of these columns. So I don't actually have to do anything down there. The student ID, well, it's not indicating it here, but it is auto incrementing. So all I need is Sam and Scott for my first and last name, and if I just hit go, it will insert that one query, and it's done this huge insert command where it put in all the default values for me, and it's saying 1 row inserted. And if I browse over here, you can see there's my row. You can also interact with this table through the SQL tab. So over here, if I go to SQL, I can do whatever I want over here. So if I hit insert, it automatically gives me an insert template. Notice these quotes around column names and table names are back quotes. They're up in the top left of your keyboard. Maybe I can show this to you. Top left, usually under the escape key, there's a back quote there. You don't actually need them unless there are spaces or special characters in your names. So phpMyAdmin is putting them in there just to be on the safe side, but we don't normally need them. I'm going to clear this, and I'm just going to type from scratch insert into students. We're just going to insert first name, and you can also select the columns out here like this. Double click that and it'll insert it for you. Again, it puts the back quotes around, but you don't need them. Values, let's do Max Saint-Amand. So we're going to insert a student, only specifying the first and last name of that student. And when I hit go, and then go browse over here, you can see that that student's been inserted with default values. If I want to change those values, I can do it. So let's do an SQL insert into students, first name. So I'll just do it the easy way here. First name, whoops, comma, last name, comma, how about completion date? Values, Rosa Saint-Amand. And for the completion date, we'll have to put this as a string, but it has to be in the right format. I think this will work. 2020, 12, 19. So finished on December 12th. Go. It worked. Go back to browse over here. So you can see instead of a null completion date now, she has an actual completion date filled in. If you go into insert, by the way, so apparently, by the way, I did get the format correct here. Insert, when it recognizes a date field, it gives you a little date chooser like that, so you can choose a date. So you can always insert through here, and you can insert multiple at a time. So you can insert another one here. I think it says to insert 5, right? Insert 5 different students. So what we can do is we can say continue insertion with 5 rows. Where's the go button for that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I guess that did it automatically. So I'm just going to call these students AA, BB, whatever, CC, DD, and EE. This is just for test purposes. And I will change some stuff. So 12.5 for that assignment. Let's give this a different finish date. I dropped out. Looks like they only lasted till September 17th. Their final mark is 5. So you can specify all of this stuff if you want. And then when I hit go, it should enter. So you can see this massive query that it created here, and the green means that it worked. 5 rows inserted. So now I have 8 rows in my database. In my table, sorry, in my table. So again, the database is this thing here, Scott, which contains this table, which when I click on it, it'll take me to the browse view over here. Okay, so yeah, you can also, by the way, make changes right in here. If I want to set a midterm value here, I just double click it, set it to 10, hit enter, and it will, this is the query that it did. Update students, set midterm equals 10, where students equals student ID, dot student ID equals 2. So it makes a bit more, there's a bit more syntax here than you really need for that query, but you can change things in here. If you do this, you're going to have to make sure you put the right type of value. If I make a mistake here, warning, I got a warning, it's been truncated. So I say okay. Oh, it's not letting me do it. So I wanted to show you what some errors look like here. Let's put back null. Actually, we have to do it this way, null. Okay. Maybe I should show you an error as well. If we're going over here, this is a good sandbox, by the way, for working out your SQL queries. Let's say I want to delete, and I'll just get the name wrong here. Delete from students, like that. If I hit delete from student, if I hit go on this, it's going to double check with me to make sure I really want to do this, and then it's going to say, oops, something wrong, table doesn't exist. Okay. Similarly, if I try to do an insert, here's my favorite trick, insert into student. Let's put a bad, this isn't my favorite trick. My favorite trick is when I forget the table name. Let's do that. So update set A1 equal 10, where, I don't know, A1 equals 0. Okay, notice it's giving me, already it's telling me it expected something else here, but if I try to hit go on this, one error, an expression was expected near set at position 7. This is the query, and this is the raw error. And yeah, so what it needed here was the column name, sorry, the table name, students. There we go. So if I go over here, I think, yeah, I just gave everybody a 10 out of 10 on assignment 1. You can have multiple tables in here. I could create more tables, and you will be creating more tables as we go, and they should all be, to make things easy for you, just keep using the same database. So put every new table inside the same database. Okay, where are we at? Okay, delete the records. We haven't done that yet. Browse the table and update one of the students' marks by double-clicking it. Use the SQL tab to raise all final grades by 10. So let's do that. So we'll do update. I'm just going to do it myself. Update students, set final equal final plus 10, where 1. So if you can leave off the where clause just to update them all, or you can use a where clause, and 1 in SQL language, 0 is false and 1 is true. So you can do that. And that'll do the same thing. So that should have added 10 to all the final grades. So they all went to 10 except 1, which was already 5, has now gone up to 15. It says to delete a row, so let's delete one. Let's delete student A here. The easiest way to do it is just come in here and hit the delete button. Boom. So phpMyAdmin gives you a lot of control over your tables, using a much more user-friendly interface than having to write the SQL. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to export this table and then log into CSUNIX and import it into our CSUNIX phpMyAdmin. Okay, have I done everything that we need to do here? I think so. So just to recap, when we're going to create our tables this way, usually in the XAMPP version of the database, when you go to hand things in, you're going to have to upload them to CSUNIX, and that's the process that we're going to walk through now as to how to get your database table onto CSUNIX. I would advise you to just use phpMyAdmin, like the delete and the edit keys here. You can edit like this, and you can just, it fills in all the values and you can change them. You can edit by double-clicking a value and changing it, and so on. I wouldn't bother to use SQL when you're just working on your table to make it the way you want it to be. But the SQL tab, it's really nice that this is here, because when you are sending SQL commands from a PHP program, you can work out the syntax of the SQL command here before you put it into your PHP program. So you can test it here to make sure it works, and then put it into your PHP program. So we'll be looking at that in the next lesson. But the next thing to do is, so what should we do next? Let's go to CSUNIX. So I'm going to leave this tab open and create a new tab, https://csunix.mohawkcollege.ca/phpMyAdmin. So now we're going to go take a look at the phpMyAdmin that sits on the CSUNIX server. And your username for this is going to be your student ID. So this one you have to log into because it's a live public database. The one on XAMPP here in localhost, we didn't have to log into it. It's configured that way. This one needs a login. So your user ID should be your student ID, and your password, and I'll have to see if I remember my password here. Your password should be your date of birth. Let's make sure I can get logged in. You know what? I might have to I got to go looking for my password. Okay, I think I have found and entered my password here, so I'm going to hit go and keep my fingers crossed. There we go. So I'm in to phpMyAdmin on CSUNIX. Now for you guys to get in, you will have to use a password, and it's the best place to go is the extra notes here. All this stuff is collected here. So logging into XAMPP on phpMyAdmin. So this is in 1B online, the extra notes. This is where you go to log into CSUNIX. Your password is your user ID is your student number, and your password is almost certainly this. If it's not that, what you can do is use WinSCP or whatever FTP client you're using to log in. Let me show you this. So I'm going to log in to my account. And where were we? If you just go into your home folder here, there's a MySQL password.txt. If you open that, it should tell you what your original password was anyway. Okay, so you can do it that way. And if you still can't log in, I can reset it. So send me an email. Make sure you include your student number and tell me that you want your MySQL password reset. If you can't even get in using WinSCP, if you can't even log in, that's your FTP password. That's a different one. If you can't get in there, send me an email and tell me you want your FTP password reset. So there's your FTP password, and there's your MySQL password that gets you into phpMyAdmin. Make sure you specify which one you want reset, and I will reset it for you. Okay, so there's also instructions in here on exporting your table. There should be, so there's really quick export and import instructions in the Module 2 guide. And in the extra notes, there's slightly more information, as well as a common error that happened last year. So we'll see if I get that error when I do this. I may not. So here's what I want to do. Oh, first, before we do anything else, so I've got my CSUNIX phpMyAdmin here. Notice there's only one database here, whereas if I go into localhost, there's a bunch of them. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Over here, you'll only see one database, and you won't be able to create new ones. That's why I told you to create a database with the same name as the one you see here, which will be your student ID. I probably have tons of tables here already. I do. Luckily, I don't. This is from previous course iterations of the course. I create these tables as examples. You'll probably see nothing here. But what I want to do is, I don't see a table called students, which is good. I want to take my students table from here, export it out of here, and then import it into CSUNIX. So here's how that works. I go to export, the export tab up here, leave all the default options. The format is SQL, and I hit go. That's interesting. I don't know why I'm getting that error. I'll say leave. That's odd. I don't know why that happened. That might be a little bit of a bug. I don't know if that'll happen to you guys or not. But it acted like I was going to leave the page, and it gave me an "Are you sure?" message. I said leave, and it gave me an SQL file down here. So I'm going to show it in the folder. So this is what you get. You get an SQL file. I have hooked up Notepad++ to open SQL files for me. So I'm going to double click it. I thought I had anyway. Oh, here it comes. Actually, let's open it with VS Code. I like that better. VS Code should be able to handle SQL. And what you'll see is that this is actually an SQL file. So you'll see SQL commands. Here's one, insert. So it basically exports your table as a set of SQL commands that can then be run on another SQL database in order to import the table, to have the effect of importing the table. So that's what you get. You get students.sql. Oh, I should mention, by the way, that you have to make sure you want, we're going to export one table at a time, and you got to make sure you're clicked on the right thing over here. If I'm clicked over here and I go to export, it's going to export my entire database, and I won't be able to import that. It'll give me problems trying to import it because it'll try to create the database. So if I hit go on this and do this leave thing, I get scott.sql. And if you look in the file there, you'll see that it first thing it does is oh no, it doesn't, I guess. I thought it would create the database, but what it does is create all the tables. So I guess it would work this time, but it's not going to work the second time I do it, because it'll try to re-export and re-import all the tables. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, the bottom line is make sure that the table that you want is selected over here. You can see how it's darker before you go to export, and then you'll be exporting that table. Okay, and you need to know where it went. So mine goes into, it'll probably just go into your downloads folder. I have a special folder called Chrome Downloads, which you're looking at right here. I'm going to move this for easy access. I'm going to move the students.sql file over to my desktop here, like that, and then I'm going to import it into, so I've already clicked import over here, but you click the import tab here in CSUNIX, and when I go to choose the file, I'm going to go up to desktop, choose students.sql, hit open, and then down here should be able to leave everything blank. I might get an error, which we'll deal with in a second. I'm going to hit go. Okay. So this is the error that we always get now. It's because of a slight incompatibility between XAMPP, which is running a much later version, and CSUNIX, which is running an earlier version of phpMyAdmin. The problem is this is actually a comment line, but it's being used to give an instruction about how to set the character set. So if you get this error, and this is covered in here as well, all you got to do is just delete that line from the file. So I'm going to go into I'm in the desktop here. I'm going to open this file. You can right click and open it, or I've already got it set to open using VS Code. Here's the line here. It's going to be near the top. Just delete it, save the file, and go again. Import, choose file, students, go. Oh, whoops, another error. Okay, this is good. I'm glad this happened, as always, because I'm showing you another error. I did not select my database over here. And I think that this is in the extra notes as well, is that you need to select your database first, and I totally forgot. So it's giving me problems. So I'm going to select my database, like this. Okay, third time's the charm. First error was a bad line, which I had to remove from the SQL file. Second error was forgetting to select the database. This time it's going to work. I guarantee it. Oh, come on. Okay. Okay. Well, this is a new one. New things like this happen every year. That's okay. Let's try. It doesn't like the character set UTF-8 MB4. Let's try to just remove that from the query when it creates the table. So I got to go back into my file again, and I'm going to have to, it's on this is the query that creates the table. I think I should be able to just do that. Let's try that. So let's go back to import, choose file, open, go. Come on, fourth time's the charm. it might be the word default. I will try that too. Failing that, we might have to put in our own character set. There we go. Okay. All right. So so that worked. If the table students is there now, if I click it, I get this. So I'm going to have to put in. I'm going to have to change the extra notes to add another error. So depending on your setup, you may or may not get these errors. But just to recap, where are we? Here. I had to go down. So the first thing I had to do was delete a line that used to be here, a comment line with a bad character set. And then the next thing I had to do was delete the default char set line, everything from here onwards, leaving the semicolon. So this is in the line that creates the table. So it's going to be the first query in your file. You're going to find it there. You have to delete it. Okay, so that's a slightly fraught process, but it did get in there. So there's just character set issues, character encoding issues between the two data sets. And hopefully, if we take a look here now, I'm browsing now this table. If I browse the table over here, the contents, the two interfaces of phpMyAdmin look slightly different, but the two contents are the same. So now I have a copy of my table in there. So let's recap one more time. When I go to export my table, I'm going to do this a second time. I hit go. I have to, this error is really weird, but I have to say I'm leaving the site, and it's going to create a students.sql file for me. Show it in the folder. I'm going to copy it over to my desktop, like this. Okay, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to fix two things. Now, when I try to import into CSUNIX, it's not going to like this line, so that line's got to go, and it's not going to like this either, the default char set, so that's got to go. What I'm doing is I'm just allowing CSUNIX to use whatever character encoding it likes. So on the table creation and here, those two things have to go, and now the file should be set up for importing. If I try to import over here, I have to select the database. I'm going to do it, and now it's going to fail again because I already have a table called students, but I wanted to show you that error as well. So I say open that file, go, and it should say, I hope, that it can't create the table. Yeah, table. So always look down here. It's weird because it's trying to draw, it looks like visually it's drawing your attention to all this, but the really important information is down here in this tiny little, in the fine print. The table already exists. So what I have to do is, if I want to re-upload this table, having changed it, I go over to the database. This gives me my list of tables. I drop the table here, and now it's gone, and it's gone from here, and I go over to import, and then I can do this. And it comes back green. And there's my table. Okay, so there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the process of exporting and importing. I'm hoping that you guys will, there's no exercises to do. I'm hoping you will keep working on this until you've figured out how to do that import. And let me know if you're getting any errors other than the ones that I showed you. I'm going to add the new error that I just discovered into here. I'm going to put a second section on when import fails. The rest of this information I think is correct. Let me know if you need any passwords reset. And make sure when you email me that you send me your full student ID and you send me whether you want the FTP password reset, that's the one that you use to log into using WinSCP, or whether you want the CSUNIX password reset, which is the one that you use to log into phpMyAdmin. By default, both of them are your birth date with year, month, day, all like 8 digits. So try those, and then try any standard passwords that you might have changed them to. And if none of those work, then send me an email and I will update it for you and send you I'll have to send you your new password. Okay, next we'll look at incorporating database commands into our PHP programs. I'll see you in the next video.